So in the last video, I covered Python syntax, variables, and data types. If you can remember, there was a brief introduction to strings. So in this video, I'm going to be taking a deeper dive to show you how to create, manipulate, and format strings in Python. I'll also go over a common mistake that beginners often make and how to fix it. So let's recap what a string is. If you're working with text in Python, whether it's a username, a sentence, or a password, you'll be using strings. A string is simply a sequence of characters wrapped in either single or double quote marks. For example, let's create a variable first name and assign it a string of Jasmine. We can then print the variable and print the type of variable to see whether everything is as we'd expect. And if you remember from the last video, the type function is how we check the data type of the variable. So you can see here, when we run the code, it has printed the name Jasmine and tells us that the data type is string. And this is exactly what we're expecting. So now that we know what strings are, let's talk about what we can do with them. Strings aren't just for storing text. They can be incredibly powerful when you start manipulating them. Maybe you need to grab just one letter from a word, extract a part of a sentence, or even change how your text looks. Python gives us multiple ways to work with strings that makes our lives a lot easier. So let's get started with the basics and first look at how we can join two strings together. Let's create another variable called surname and assign it a value of Davis. Now let's create a variable called full name, and just as you would with maths, if you want to join two strings together, you simply use the addition sign. For example, full name equals first name plus surname. So what do you think will happen when we run this? If you guessed that it would print Jasmine Davis as one word, then you're correct. And this is because Python doesn't add any white space when adding strings together. It simply sticks them one string after another. So if we want a white space between the two names, we need to add this in ourselves. We can do this by adding a white space in between the two name variables. Now if we rerun this program, you'll see that Jasmine Davis is now written with a space in between the two names. So you can use this technique anytime you want to combine multiple pieces of text in Python. Now next, let's look at how you can repeat strings. So first we'll create a variable called greeting and assign it a value of hello. Now for whatever reason, you may want the greeting to be printed 3 times in a row. So what we can do is write our print function and input the variable name. And then in the same way as you would if you're doing maths, you can write an asterisk, which stands for multiply, and then the number you want to multiply by. So when we run this, you can see that hello has been repeated 3 times in a row. You can also see that it has the same white space problem as our previous example. So if you'd like to fix this, you can put greeting plus the white space in brackets, followed by multiply by 3. And now when you rerun this code, you can see it says hello, hello, hello with the correct spacing. So now let's look at how we can access specific characters within a string. This can come in handy if you ever need to extract certain information, for example, grabbing the first letter of a name, or maybe you're analyzing text and need to extract certain characters. This is where indexing comes in. Every character in a string has an index number, and when coding, we use zero-based indexing. What this means is that you start counting from 0 instead of 1. This means that the first character of every string is 0, and every character after is then assigned the next number. So the second character is 1, the third is 2, and so on. This can feel a little strange at first, but you'll get used to it in no time. So let's create a variable called company and assign it a value of CodeBytes. Next we'll use the print statement to print the word. And you can see CodeBytes is printed as you'd expect. But say we wanted to only print the first letter. What we can do is add square brackets after the variable and then use 0 to grab the first character of the string. Because remember, when coding, we start counting from 0 and not 1. So when we run this program, you can see that we have C as our output, as that's the first character in our string. Now let's grab the 5th letter B, and to do this, we'll need to use index 4, because remember, we always start from 0. When we run this, you can see that we've printed the letter B as you'd expect. You can also grab the last character of a string by using -1, And this is because Python allows negative indexing, which means we can count backwards from right to left. So in this example, this is how CodeBytes would be indexed. This can be super useful if you don't know how long a string is but need the last character. But what if you wanted to grab a few characters instead? For example, if you want to extract someone's last name from their full name, or if you only need a part of a file name. That's where slicing comes in. Slicing is when you extract a specific section of a string instead of just one character. So let's say we want to grab the first 4 characters of our company name. We'll use our print statement with the variable company and then add the square brackets again and write 0:4. And what this means is we want to get the characters from 0 and stop at index 4, but not to include it. So we'll be grabbing characters 0, 1, 2, and 3. When we run our code, you can see we have the first 4 characters printed just as you'd expect. So just to reiterate, the number 4 doesn't mean the 4th character, it means stop right before index 4. This is a common mistake that beginners make, so always remember the second number when you slice is where Python stops and not what it includes. And with slicing, you can also do things like grab everything from a specific index onwards. So in this example, we'll write 4 and then colon, but we'll leave the rest blank. This then gives us the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th character. And this is because we've asked for everything from the 4th index onwards. By not having a number after the colon, Python understands that you want to keep going until the end of the string. This is useful when you don't know the length of the string, but you know where you want to start. And this also works the other way around. If you leave out the starting index and just write :4, Python assumes you want everything starting from 0, going all the way up to, but not including, index 4. So it will grab just the first 4 characters for you. Now that we know how to access and extract parts of a string, what if we want to change how our text looks? Maybe you need to convert a name to uppercase, remove extra white space, or replace a word in a sentence. Python strings come with built-in methods that let us easily modify text, so let's check them out. One quick thing that's important to note is that strings in Python are immutable. So this means that once a string is created, you can't change its characters directly. But don't worry, instead of changing the original string, we can create a new one when using these string methods. So sometimes you might want to standardize text by converting everything to upper or lower case. And this is useful when checking user input or to make comparisons. In Python, we can easily modify the case using .upper or .lower. So let's create a new variable called uppercase name, and then we'll use the full name variable and add .upper to the end. We'll then print our new variable, and when we run this code, you can see that it's capitalized the whole string, and this new value's been stored in the new variable that we've created called uppercase name. And we can do the exact same with lowercase by creating a variable called lowercase name, and then we can add the .lower to the end of full name. So now when we print this variable, you can see it outputs the string completely in lowercase. So what if we now wanted to remove any unwanted white space from our strings? We can use the strip function to remove it, but it's important to note that the strip function only removes white space at the beginning or end of a string, not any spaces between the words. So let's create a new variable called message and assign it a value of let's learn Python. You can see here I've added extra white space at the start, end, and in the middle of the string. Now if we create a new variable called clean message, we can then use the message variable with the method strip, and then we can now print our code for both the message and the clean message. So when we run this, you can see that the white space has been removed from the start and the end of the string, but not in the middle. Now let's look at how you can replace a part of a string. This can come in handy if you need to update a specific word, fix a typo, or swap one piece of text for another. So let's replace our original message to say, let's learn JavaScript. To do this, we'll create a new variable called new message, and then write our variable followed by replace. Now within the replace method, the first parameter is the old value you want to replace, so in this instance Python, and the second parameter is the new value that you want to use instead. for example, JavaScript. So now let's print our new variable, new message, and you'll see the word Python has been replaced, and it now says, let's learn JavaScript. But sometimes you may just want to know if a specific word exists in a string and where it's located. This is where the find function comes in handy. The find function will return the index of the first time it appears, and if it isn't found, it returns -1. So let's create the variable findWord, and we'll use the clean message variable this time and add .find, and then we'll put the word Python in the brackets. When we run the print function, you can see that we get 13, because Python starts at index 13 in this string. If we change Python to HTML and rerun the code, you can now see it says -1, and that's because HTML doesn't exist in this string. And finally, you may need to count how many times a specific substring appears in your string. And you can probably guess that the function is called count. So let's create a new variable called bulletin, and we'll write a string that says Python, Python, Python. We can now create a new variable called count bulletin. We can then attach the count method to the end of our variable, and when we print this code, you can see that it says 3 because Python appears 3 times in this string. And hopefully you can see that by using these inbuilt methods, you can manipulate strings quite easily. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. I think there's about 50-ish built-in string methods in Python, so you can check them out in the Python docs to see what's possible. But hopefully, these few examples have shown you how simple and easy it is to get started with string manipulation in Python. So now that we've covered a few different ways you can modify your strings, let's move on to how we can format them. One of the most useful and convenient ways to work with strings is by using f-strings. An f-string is simply just a formatted string, and it's a way to embed expressions or variable values directly into a string, making it easier to build dynamic text. So let's create a variable called welcome message, and now let's build our f-string. What we need to do is put the letter F before the string, and then inside the quote marks, we use curly braces where we want to insert a variable or expression. For example, hi, first name, welcome to company. When you run this, you'll see that it outputs, hi Jasmine, welcome to CodeBytes. This means that instead of writing a fixed message, Python can now dynamically replace the first name and company name with whatever is stored in that variable. So let's update the first name to Ryan, because now when we rerun this code, you'll be able to see that it outputs, hi Ryan, welcome to CodeBytes. This is what makes f-strings so powerful, as they aren't just fixed but adapt based on the variables or expressions inside of them. Whether it's a username, a score in a game, or the result of a calculation, f-strings make it easy to display dynamic information without any extra effort. So finally, let's look at one of the most common mistakes that beginners usually make when using strings. And this is trying to use apostrophes inside strings that are surrounded by single quote marks. This causes a syntax error because Python gets confused by the apostrophe that appears in the word, as it assumes that that indicates the end of the string. An easy way to avoid this is to use double quote marks, and then the apostrophe will just be ignored and printed like normal. But there's also another easy fix which uses escape characters. And all an escape character is a backslash, and that tells Python to treat the next character after the backslash as part of the string rather than a special character. Therefore, Python doesn't end the string early and it doesn't error. So let's create a variable, common error, and use single quote marks. We'll write, I don't know why this has caused an error. You can see here that Python has ended the string at the apostrophe in the word don't, as it thinks that it's a closing quote. And the rest of the text is then just left hanging, causing Python to get confused and results in this syntax error. So let's change the single quote marks to double quote marks. And now you can see that we can run the code without any error, as Python isn't looking for any closing apostrophes, as the double quote marks define the string. If we change it back to single quote marks and then add the backslash before the apostrophe, we can now run this code and see that it doesn't error, as the escape character means that the apostrophe is treated as part of the string. So both methods will work, but the key takeaway is that escape characters help when you're dealing with special characters like apostrophes or quotes inside of strings. And that wraps up the video. You now know how to manipulate and format strings in Python, which is a critical skill for building dynamic programs. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions and what you're most excited to learn about next in Python.